Welcome to the Regeneration Podcast, friends and foes. One of our co-hosts has less facial hair, if you're seeing us on YouTube, than he did the last time we talked. What gives, my friend?
Well, I needed a vacation and I couldn't afford to go any, I need, so I couldn't afford one, so I just shaved. So just give me a different change of scenery.
Yeah,
And as soon as
it's
I
really cool.
shaved it off, Bonnie said, "No, no, no,
Oh,
no."
really?
Oh yeah, she hates me
Okay, yeah,
now.
I wouldn't have guessed. It looks totally fine. It's just and since the blessed time, the number of years we've known each other, or even just done podcasts and things, which certainly goes back to regular contact, very regular contact at the beginning of COVID and so forth. But have you shaved it a couple of times and during our friendship?
Probably at least
Okay, yeah,
once.
yeah. I've stayed with this motley crew of facial hairs for I'm guessing like 6 years now. But prior to that,
You
there
you
was
didn't
a
have it when I met you here.
really I was clean shaven or like a
You're
goatee
clean.
or
I'm
something.
pretty sure you were clean shaven, yeah.
Yeah, it was such a fun time. I've got a question for the sociologist. Um, I run the migrant center working with a lot of um, Mexican migrants and dairy farmers and things, and Spanish or Mexican predominantly Catholic communities and their liturgy and the whole phenomenon of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and the divine femininity. But I've been reading a book. Our listeners always say like what we're reading. One of them is Our Lady of Controversy, Alma Lopez's Irreverent Apparition, and the basic storyline is yeah, sometimes postmodern scholars can be interesting, if nothing else. But some lady put together before AI, but people were playing with digital art and put together, I guess, this image, which was going to be something of an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Hmm.
Um, and then the Catholic Church down there, as a matter of historical record, got involved. I think the bishop, and people were, so it was kind of conservatives plus culture. It's not so much as I've read some of the papers. And these are just papers on it. It's not always like left and right, but kind of traditionalist versus like this is sacrilege. And so there's just papers on it. It's just interesting. And I was thinking of we talk about the rad trads. There's a movement towards modesty in some ways, and just the idea. I'm going to add one more layer to this, and I appreciate your opinion, Michael. Is one episode ago or maybe two, I was mentioning a conversation I had with Father John Gribwich, and he framed a lot of what goes on in the Catholic Church through this notion that if you have good boundaries, they don't need protecting all the time. That we're always talking in the church about protecting these boundaries, protecting these boundaries. And Gribwich was saying in business school, they showed you that on playgrounds, and I'm just repeating what I said
Yeah.
once, on playgrounds, kids, if there's no fences, they tend to huddle near the jungle gym in the middle. But when
Hmm.
there's just strong fences, they play everywhere. They play everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And so,
That's a truth that goes back
yep,
30 years at least.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so with something like this, I'm not saying whether something's sacrilege or not, but we talk about modesty. And I know when my kids were young, you couldn't actually take my daughters to a mall store and anything. You'd almost have to pay a seamstress. That there was nothing you could buy that was kind of modest, and just sending them to school. But like, are there good fences in this area of modesty? Like, what's too far, even considering, and again, this ties back to divine femininity, boxing gloves. Um,
And
you
those
know,
are boxing gloves. That's weird.
yeah, they are. What are the limits? And how do you kind of navigate these waters? Because the idea of a
Hmm.
strong
Well,
Latina woman is part of it. You read some of the history where again, like I'm just reading about the years of the apparition and sociological history, of villages and what things were like in the first 100 years of how this was celebrated, and women were treated like garbage, man, garbage. And as they've been treated like garbage less and less, this is awkward. There's a change in dress and so forth, and um,
hmm
yeah, you continue. You continue.
Well, well, I feel what you were saying about, finding clothing that wasn't sexed up for girls, but
It was impossible.
my youngest girl is 19 now, or she's about to turn 20. So that's not as much on my mind as it used to be.
Yeah.
But what is on my mind concerning this is this OnlyFans phenomenon,
Okay.
right? Where I saw this, I don't know if it's true, but it was from a reputable source that I think they were saying one out of every 50 women, and I don't know if it was, it must have been every 50 women of a certain
My
age,
heart's gonna break.
has an OnlyFans channel and they're basically doing porn.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, so it kind of blows the lid off.
Even if that had like three more zeros on it, honestly, I talk about scale a lot. It's still just so shocking.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but and this really, and
But
it's weird.
put it in a larger context.
I
So
don't.
we have, yeah, okay.
Well, I
Like,
think, I didn't even know anything about it, and I heard students talking about it a couple of years ago. Then what the hell are they talking about? So I looked it up, like pretend I did, because I wanted to pretend I knew what was going on. And I I found out that, and this is I didn't look this up a while ago. I said, and I don't know what the stats are now, but that it really arose during COVID when everybody
okay,
was locked up.
okay.
And some people couldn't work, and people were bored. People were kind of shoved onto their computers just to try to have the semblance of contact with the outside world, and it just exploded from there.
Hmm.
And now it's you probably saw recently, and I try to avoid it as much as possible on social media, but it's all over the place that a couple of British women are basically having a contest to see who can bang the most guys in 12 hours.
I saw the first round of that with that poor young lady
And it keeps going
who
on.
admitted to being traumatized by it. Yeah.
Well, she admitted to being traumatized, and now she's doing going in for round two.
Yeah. And that's kind of a
Okay.
performance art, but maybe a damn good, but sick, demonic,
Well,
but
it's very
no,
sick. Yeah,
super
yeah.
sad performance art.
And so that's what I've been thinking about is
Yeah.
because when you and I were kids, right? I mean, this doesn't just affect women. There were there were dudes who went to participate, right?
Yeah.
And who knows how many online, or you know what I mean? Um, but pornography has become, it's not the really disturbing thing with those two girls, those two British girls, is that
I didn't even know they were British, or I
no
thought
one's
they were.
even shocked in a way. I mean, people are pretending to be shocked, but okay, what's it?
Yeah, it's just another quantitative phenomenon.
Yeah,
It's not a qualitative difference. She was
and
hoping for a smidge of the qualitative, and it had none. It was quantitative, and it's going to continue to be quantitative, and it goes now from like 100 to 500 or something.
it's just, I don't know. I mean, it certainly seems like collapse of the Roman Empire vibes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think that's because people talked about, compare, and I wouldn't say the United States, I would say the West
Mhm.
to the Roman Empire,
Yeah, I do.
the Anglo-American Empire, we can
And
call it.
I always think it's that I look at the Catholic Church, the dying and rising, that the version of it that we brought over here, which did just great yeoman's work for a long time for the Irish and the Germans and everything. And it goes back to the Mexican church, the indigenous church, Our Lady of Guadalupe, is the European, and this ties in with Steiner and Spengler. The European had kind of come over here and rested for a while, but the land is kind of even changing us. You've got generations of people your ancestors come before you, who've lived on this land, Michael. And that we're just trying to find our own. That's my thing, is through the localities of the divinity or the divine feminine. Our Lady of this, Our Lady of that, springs, um, parishes. When we merge churches together as part of pastoral planning, and they need kind of a joint name for the new umbrella parish. Invariably, the choice is Our Lady of this, like Our Lady of this river, Our Lady of this mountain, Our Lady of this valley. So that's just natural in the Catholic blood. That's what the people put forth for the name of their church. And not during my tenure, but I know when I used to lead a parish, the diocese was like, we've received so many of these. Might you? They didn't strong arm us, but might you think of something else? And we became Saint Luke the Evangelist.
Hmm.
But uh, do you think, Michael, even like going out, we said the lady on OnlyFans, it's quantitative, or at least I strongly see it that way. Do you think, and it's kind of a chicken and an egg phenomenon, women are not finding men who are grown up who can seem suitable partners, and it's a yin yang, it's a push pull factor. How would you tell the story?
The
Connecting a
feedback
few
loop
more dots.
because
It is a feedback loop.
um yeah, I just don't I mean is this I mean have we arrived at feminism's end game? Is this the end result of feminism? Is this feminine power, right?
And
And
define feminism the way you're using it here.
well, feminine power. That's what I'm
Oh,
going to
okay.
describe it as
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
was the argument of if you look back through feminism, it was always about pricks in power, right? It was who gets to call the shots, right? It was,
It was.
and
Whose fault is that, though? I mean, like, who do we blame? And it seems like a natural aspiration. We could, I don't know. We could all wish that,
well,
we see it in the
there's that. I
religious
mean,
world
the
all the
thing
time.
is, they acted like raising a family wasn't power, right?
That's what too much of the, it's not all of it as far as I can see, because Teresa of Lisieux felt called to some type of priesthood. But like most of us characterize huge percentages of the push for a female priesthood in the Catholic Church as kind of coming under the umbrella of the stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
um, anything a man I can do better, and you
I just
know.
find part of it's natural again. I know I said it, but
Yeah, yeah, I think you're seeing it also with the whole thing with trans athletes, dudes masquerading as women playing in women's sports. I mean, that
mhm.
is, and then then white liberal women defending it.
And a lot of guys, that does more damage to the people who hold that opinion as it does to the body that was changed.
I
And
know,
yeah, yeah,
and but
yeah.
but that, to me, that all that it seems like, and it didn't seem like for the longest time, but now it seems like. I was probably, I don't know if I was just not paying attention or not interpreting it properly, but it seems now, I mean, whatever feminism is or not isn't, it seems like whatever that trajectory is ended up at this moment in history in 50 out of every,
Yeah.
50 out of every 1,000 women having an OnlyFans, men pretending to be women in women's sports,
Yeah.
treating fertility as a disease
Where
and
we're
my
bad?
body made a
Yeah.
choice,
Yeah. Yeah. And
right?
I looked at my correspondence with Tara, and I'll write to her again, but we were trying to have her on. I would love to hear a woman like Tara or Christopher Lash, of blessed memory, or his daughter Elizabeth Lash Quinn, because it wouldn't be a strong disagreement. Or Angela, what's her name over in the British Isles? She was kind of canceled early. Angela Nagel.
Mm,
She can think like nobody. Or Mary Harrington, that you
Mary
like.
Harrington. Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to hear. We would need a woman to help us nuance it, but I don't hear any disrespect of women coming from you. I would say
No,
um, feminism's end game. Like everything, the worst is the corruption of the best. That's one
well,
of the first things I'd say.
and Mary Harrington, she first came into my radar a couple years ago. Uh, there was a clip she did for Unheard. It's some kind of debate with some transhumanist feminist woman girl. She was a girl. She was a girl to me. She was probably 25. Um, and Harrington was saying, and she's right. I mean, another thing,
Yeah,
they acted like the pill was liberating women,
right.
but it was she calls it the first the, the vanguard of transhumanism because it was using um medicines or whatever you want to call it, some kind of intervention to change how a human organism works.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
How and not only how it works, how it's supposed to work,
yeah,
right? And that, but you can see, right? These girls would not be on OnlyFans doing all this stuff were it not for the pill,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally.
So it didn't liberate women, though that's how it was sold.
It's very important what you're
It
saying. Totally.
liberated scumbag men,
Hmm.
right? So, I've met these people for
Yeah,
30
yeah,
some
yep.
years, these guys, these Lothario types, right? But they're like, yeah, I'm really into feminism. Right. No, you're not. You're into feminism because the chicks dig it. right?
Describe your favorite like Hollywood to our listeners, and even including myself on this one. Who's the great like Hollywood image of the Lothario type you're talking about in culture?
Probably most of them. I can't think. Nobody
Okay.
jumps off the top of my
And
head.
what characterizes them? And you're doing this for me. I'm not insulting our listeners
Well,
so much as myself. Yeah.
I have, I have met people like quite a few people like this. Usually, and it's interesting because they're men typically my age and older, but this is going back 30 years, right? Say half a generation, so 14
I'll
or
pick
so
up
years older
skills.
than I am,
Yeah.
who would have this real, they'd have this great feminist rap, yeah, I really believe in the, I'm
This
really into the
conversation cracks
goddess.
me up.
Yeah, I'm really into men screwed up the world. We should give
I
power.
have part of that in me.
And they,
I have part of that in me because I do it with the left brain stuff, Michael, and so I would nuance it. But there's a huge part of me. That's why I'm having so much fun. I want to be condemned or I want to be exposed or I just want to know
well,
myself more. But
I'm the
I think,
sociology
men,
guy, right?
yeah, yeah, right,
So,
right. Yeah.
but 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 they use it. They don't. I mean, the people, these guys who say this kind of stuff, it's totally insincere. They're kind of
Agreed. Agreed.
what do they call it? They're narcissists,
Yeah.
right?
If I
And
used
they're
it in
just
an
telling you, they're
insincere
just salesmen.
way. Yeah. Yeah.
They're just telling these girls what they think, actually what the girls probably want to hear.
Yeah.
He really believes in, oh yeah, right. And
Yeah.
they don't. And what happens is very often they knock girls up and, they're,
Yeah.
and they leave them, or they have a trail of abortions through,
Yeah.
going back decades because they have this persona they've created and it's a complete bullshit.
Right. Wow. That was
I don't
great.
know if you,
Yeah.
so I don't know if you met people, but I met a lot of people like this.
No, no, no. I totally do. And I'm glad you unpacked it. And it seems to me again, I was thinking, um, that when I was saying I have part of that in me, or you're the sociology guy, I'm not trying to be pious, but I thought
Yeah.
regarding that thing, when you get into the gender piece, I talk about it at the monastery. We both talk about gender a lot. That to confuse means and ends in that conversation
Hmm.
at this time would be like breaking the commandment of taking God's name in vain. And I'm sure you agree, because this is where the rubber meets the road. Gender. Um, is it a dynamism? Is it
Well,
living? Is it just a construct? And again,
right.
even if it's always had part constructs, but no, you and I would both say, no, this is the foundational poetry, the poetry of the whole thing. You know?
Yeah, and I think a lot was destroyed in the way. And the thing is, so you get that kind of persona that's projected. Well, not just the Lothario preaching goddess worship, but women, like that
What
that,
play is
that poster you
Lothario
see
in?
every
Okay.
place,
Yeah.
right? We can do with the chick with the bandana on, like from World War II,
Yeah.
women power, whatever it's called, right? So that's just phony as hell. But the opposite of that is also a caricature,
And
which
that's
is
how we began this thing. Like, how much is too much piety versus like this lady?
well,
Is
what
that where
happens
you're
is
going? That's where you're going,
that
right?
that
Yeah.
caricature creates another caricature, which is the trad wife, right?
Right. That's what I knew you were going there. Yeah.
Um, Now people would say that Bonnie is a trad wife. She would never could describe her like that.
Mhm.
We don't think we've never thought in those terms. But the thing is, if you push in an absurd direction in one way, you'll get a response from in an absurd direction from the other way. So, for instance, yesterday, I saw this really stupid meme on X. And it was like, this is what men really want. And it was like this picture, like a cartoon, illustration from the 50s of a father in a suit and a short haircut, and the mother with her cute little dress and a smart little hat. And they're one boy, one girl, looking very pious at mass. I'm like, come on. Come on. Do we have to do, is this really the answer? And that's what
And how do we define those things? Because manners are good, and it goes back, and it's not like the tangent is everything, but like, how
because
do we get into like, where does it become inauthentic? Where does it become a caricature? Where does it become like obviously wanting something less maybe pietistic than certain versions of portrayals of Our Lady, right?
Hmm.
Does that still does that still is that still part of a culture of hiding the body? And yet both of us are saying we're also not talking about just putting it all out there.
Hmm.
I'm going back to that notion of like if we have good fences, but when it comes to, from a mini skirt above the knee, like how do you use? I'm sure probably you use beauty to get at this in some way, Michael. But again, I began by saying, what does this sociologist think?
Well,
Yeah.
well, people, I think we, especially in a media-driven age,
Mhm.
whether it's a, you know, whatever media you want to talk about. In a media-driven age, people don't know how to be authentic, because they have all these stereotypical models out there, or horrible
Right.
models. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
And people, and this is Heidegger was talking about this, right? Is how do you, he calls it thrownness,
Yeah. Right.
and what he means by that is we're thrown towards death, and because we're thrown towards death and we're not even psychologically aware that we're scared shitless of being thrown towards death, we pick up all these phony things to do, like, I know I'm a socialist and everything's about social or feminism, right? I'm all about feminism. I'm getting blue hair. I'm doing the whole thing, getting some piercings and tattoos. Got the package, right? Or they're gonna do. I'm gonna be a trad guy and or an ortho bro, and and there's a certain package of accessories that come with that, and so you get all the accessories, right? Got the blue hair, got the piercings, or I have the long skirt. I have I wear a tie and a suit all the time, smoke a pipe, right? You
Right.
know, and the thing is, this is what Heidegger would say, that those people are running away from their being thrown towards death. And he also says that when you finally come to terms with your thrownness, you what happens is you move into Storge or care,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you're
Right.
no longer, this is what he calls
So he
authenticity.
uses that storge, which is seminal
I'm
to
pretty sure
Flo.
it's the word he uses, and it's
I
that
don't know if that's Russian or German or similar in both, but Florensky
it's
uses that in Pillar and
Greek.
Ground of Truth.
It's Greek.
Okay, so they
Yeah.
take it from right, right, right. Thank you.
But and that's what he calls authenticity, right?
Yep,
So
yep.
you finally stop lying to yourself about your existential condition,
Hmm.
right? And of course you can fall back into lying to yourself about it again. But I think that's what I see when I see, you know, even if you're really cynical, the OnlyFans phenomena, you can say, well, it's about making money. Because some of those girls I was reading were making like, well, $43 million a year,
Yeah,
which is nuts,
right, right, right.
right? And somebody's participating in that economy, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, talk about paying off your student loans, right?
Yeah, you're very eloquent in speaking about the people who are consuming this, right?
And
I'd want
it's
to say,
economy.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
an economy of
yeah,
this, right?
right,
It's an
right.
economy, and it's an economy of evil.
Hmm.
And it turns, and this is Heidegger again. I don't know, I'm going on Heidegger. I haven't read Heidegger in a long time, but
Yeah.
he says it turns people into standing reserve,
Hmm.
become a product,
Right.
right? That was always my biggest fear with being like having a website or being online or even doing a show. Um, the fear of turning oneself into a, yeah. Speaking of turning one into a product, we have these available for sale. You know what I mean?
I keep on talking about t-shirts. I just can't. I'm so not motivated by that I'd love to
Listen,
do it. So many people are interested. I'd be glad to do it.
well,
None of us want to form groupies, but
well, I
I
don't
can't even get
mind.
motivated to put it out there.
I mean, in a way, you could say, I mean, not we're not making any money from it, but
No,
the show is kind of a product. It's something we produce,
sure.
but that's the reason it is because we foolishly think that people want to hear what we have to say, just about normal stuff, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but then, but which is very different, I think.
I saw this book as I was walking up the
Well, you
stairs to be on the podcast, and the question came to me that set us off on this.
when and put it that, and I don't like to slam on people I know, but and I think it goes in the OnlyFans direction, right? Where
Mhm.
those girls are turning themselves into a product,
Right.
right? For profit. But when you do that, you lose your humanity, or at
Yeah.
least a piece of it, right?
Have
Um,
they lost their humanity prior to that? And I'm
because
not
you're
trying to be
invest
super
because
meta.
now you're invested in it.
Okay.
And I think it's not just this isn't a recent phenomenon in human culture.
No, no,
And
no.
on the other hand, I hate to say it, but you see it with um media personalities. I mean, I think Paul Kingsnorth is in danger of turning himself into a product because now, when you're a product, you're expected to produce more of the same product. What do they call it? They call it content, right? I
Yeah,
hate
yeah,
that
yeah.
word.
Yeah, yeah.
I really like your content. I hate that word, but there's an expectation, and I saw this decades ago when I was an astrologer that I realized that there was a mechanism inside of me that get the key, and this is the basically the business model for big pharma and everybody else is get a customer healed is a person healed is a customer lost. So when I
Right,
was
right.
working as an astrologer and I saw people were investing way too much importance in what I had to tell them.
Hmm.
B, I was starting to be addicted to the money.
Uh,
And I was like, whoa, this is not a good place to be. I don't want these people relying on me, but because then I get them into this feedback loop where, yeah, you
right, right,
can
right.
come every
Yeah,
couple of weeks or a couple month or whatever.
yeah,
Not doing that. And so I stopped right then because I
yeah,
saw that temptation.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I think it's normal. And I think this is probably a temptation that psychotherapists go through, right? This person gets better. You're going to have to find a new sick person, right?
I think they must bring that up in class, but certainly, yeah, that's something
Well,
that
I think
have
that's
to.
I
Oh,
think, and
sure.
and the thing is, I've known psychotherapists who have done this,
Right, right, right.
right, or
Yeah.
chiropractors or
Hmm.
whomever,
Right.
right, keep the customers coming back, right,
Hmm. Yeah.
return customer,
It's like the Munchausen syndrome. The mothers who keep their kids sick so they need their moms and everything.
right,
It's all this fear of getting out of the boat, or you know, not even switching the subject, but this was, the Korean scholar Byung-Chul Han. I'd mentioned
oh
the
yeah,
agony of it's this whole theory of we're in danger of completely losing the other, right? That love could actually be gone. The standard is one guy is like another guy. The view of the world, which gets at thrownness, I think. When I think of thrownness, Michael, I think of you edified me and you're the Heideggerian. But for me, even yesterday I had to give a talk at our local parish, and some ladies were asking me some questions. And I was telling him of the spiritual discipline of remembering that we were born out of our mom's womb and we just had to hit the ground running, that we keep on affecting in our brains these Archimedean points. And that's a distinction between, say, Karl Rahner and Hans Urs von Balthasar. And doesn't mean you can't get some good insights from Rahner, that affected distance that comments on things from a rootless, fleshless distance. Fergus Kerr, the great Dominican, wrote a book. This is a title, folks, so don't be angry. Theology After Wittgenstein, gets at some of this. How too many theologians, don't even practice the discipline that says, fundamentally, I'm still looking at the world left and right. The idea that I was like Elon Musk's failed rocket or something, looking down at the world and seeing everybody as dots. I suppose even if you could do that, you're confusing more than you're gaining, because to see people at dots is to lose the only important thing about them, which is their personhood and so forth, right?
hmm
Um, so there's this commodification, obviously. And just to go back, what I said before is like how um, eloquent you are bringing in the guys who consume this. Are these people lost before they're coming in? You
well,
know, yeah.
well, I think the reason it blew up, I think it's always a
I want to
problem,
go back to like the mother-child relationship.
but I think it blew up. Well, put it this way, it blew up because of COVID and because people were shut in.
Okay, that's why it blew
And
up. Okay,
depression and other kinds of things and
hmm,
anxiety, it's angst. Thank you,
yeah,
Heidegger. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, threw people into looking for something, at least if it's an erotic stimulation, at least it's stimulation, right?
yeah,
It's better than just sitting here staring at the four walls,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So and I
I
do.
think that's very important, that distinction. The theologian Olivier Clement makes that too, that like when all you do is work in a cubicle next to a computer, the human body is the only nature you're getting. You know, the human body, I know in a beautiful way, the worst being the corruption of the best. Father Isaac Slater, just a wonderful monk at the Abbey of the Genesee, you know, when they take care of the old guys and they have to be cleaned up and so forth, he'll say that's the only other time I touch another human body.
Hmm.
You know, that's a beautiful image, isn't it? No, that's poetry.
Hmm.
But this idea that we're surrounded by machines, artificial atmospheres, artificial air, car interiors, windshields, the human body is all there is. So that's, you know, let's go back to our friend Martin Shaw, give 12 secret names to a tree, you know, and do it like your life depended on it. You know, keep
Hmm.
on going to the tree, you know, some connection to something outside yourself, the other, the eros or something. You go on.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah. So I think, in a way, I think a lot of different uh, elements kind of coalesced over COVID because
Yeah.
of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, I mean, the thing is, I think the anxiety was created intentionally, right? Because
You and
remember
I
that they
both.
kept saying, remember, first it was, what was it, 14 days to flatten the curve or whatever it was, right?
Uh-huh.
And you're like, oh, it's kind of make people nervous, right? But then they kept extending it, and
Yeah.
then no, we're gonna add this. No, no, get a mask, get two masks, get
Yeah.
three,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Let me tell you a
Then
quick anecdote about
you
that.
get the
Go ahead.
vaccine,
Yeah.
you'd be fine. You get
Yeah.
two, get three, get four, and they kept stretching it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They wanted to see how far they could. Let's see how far we can take this baby, right?
Hmm.
And but that created so much, and
Yeah.
it's still there. So much anxiety, and I think you saw it over the Trump campaign too, right?
Yeah.
The assassination, assassination attempts, right? Which
Uh-huh.
is nuts.
Uh-huh.
We don't even have time to process that, right?
Yeah.
And one bizarre thing after another, the threat of World War III, all these things that are designed to create anxiety.
I saw it this week in California so much. A very quick interlude because I was watching local LA news, you know, and the fires were creeping, and you knew the Santa Ana winds will be coming back like 3 more weeks, you know, and though we lost everything, we can start rebuilding, but Santa Ana winds, and you know, and just this emergency keeps on getting extended. And again, by design, not by design in some cases, but let's at least be honest about one thing, the damage that does to the human psyche.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And but what do people do to fill that hole then, right?
I see it. I see it. Yeah.
And I think part of the explosion of OnlyFans and all those guys going on there and participating is because well, I think part of it is loneliness,
Mhm.
right?
Huge. That's a big
Isolation,
context. Super important. Yeah,
loneliness.
yeah.
And I think this is a culture, and I don't know what the demographics are, but I would assume that it's the same demographic that was trapped in and tends to be trapped in video game culture.
Mhm.
It's just, the, the next illogical step in video game culture.
Mhm.
And then pretty soon, you know, and I mean, it's tragic, and I don't know how people are gonna.
How about theory pulling out of my ass right now, like transgender phenomenon as kind of like a misdirection ploy for the fact that like lately what I'm seeing on culture, the reversion after this, the loneliness and what's going on in guy dating culture and objectifying women,
Yeah,
is that return, you know, that was pretty easy for the US government to promote like there's no such thing as gender for a while. You know, we're trying to push back on that finally, but the opposition to that now is threatening to be very dark, where you have lonely men who are on computers and the wall between them and the whole world of the feminine seems miles away. So you listen to Andrew Tate and say, what do
mhm.
you think about that?
Um, I think the trans phenomenon, it also exploded over the last 5 years.
It did. It did.
And it exploded for the exact same reasons. Kids were locked up in their houses during COVID, full of anxiety. Then they find this community. Yeah, you're probably really a girl, or whatever it was, right? And they get affirmation of it. And then And then what you've seen happen too is this gets translated into a move for power.
Yeah,
You just don't want to. Now it's you don't just have to be. Uh, I found who my true self is. Now everybody has to bow down and worship it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's
There
kind
has
of
to be one
ironic.
on every executive board of directors,
And it,
except the really, really rich
and you've seen
companies.
all this anger and protest and stuff, right? And
That's
when you
Guido's
see,
whole thing about his book, The Ideology of Tyranny. How so much of this is just harnessed towards misdirection. Um,
and yeah,
you know,
and it makes me. You can't help but think about Freud and what's the name of that book? Uh, Civilization and its
sure, sure,
Discontents.
sure. Yeah.
Because Freud, I don't completely agree with Freud, but he's not stupid either, right?
No,
And when he says that civilization has because people have violent tendencies and civilization keeps people discontent, so they don't so they have to keep reaching, so they don't un enact their violent tendencies.
yeah, yeah,
Now, now I don't there that's probably he's probably way oversimplifying.
yeah.
But he was of that era where they had grand plans that seemed to work, but when you look at the particulars, it didn't always.
Sure, but like one coda to that though is like when you look at Carl Jung, and you know this, but letting our listeners know, because I was just thinking how so many of our even medical doctors, I don't know about you, but I know so many nurses and doctors are not what they used to be, folks. A lot of them are just kind of narcissists who are good at taking tests, and pleasing
Yeah.
people.
Oh,
And
who's the doctor here?
yeah, but that Freud, even if we say, wow, there's some simplification there, Civilization and Discontent, a book that's maybe about 160 pages. I used to teach it for humanities. That is still the distillation of like probably 8 huge 2-gallon buckets. Whereas nowadays, like modern like dissertations are tiny and it's about like a 1-to-1 ratio. And especially when you look at Carl Jung, who like in our friend Lindsay Rose, Peter Kingsley, just could show that like people like Jung, and I don't know as much about Freud, had command of all the ancient languages, all the ancient mythology, historical patterns. They had read their Bakunin, they had read. So I
Hmm.
agree with you, but like let's not think that like the young kid who just starts listening to the Regeneration podcast, or the young kid who's reading conservative politics, that they would think that like Freud, came up with this stuff out of his ass,
No, and that's what
about
the
that.
thing
But
is. What I love about Freud and Jung in that era
yeah.
is, you know, it, these guys were
They swang for the
read,
fences.
so
Yeah,
well
yeah,
educated
yeah,
that there was such a wealth of knowledge and
yeah,
wisdom that they were resting upon, right?
yeah, yeah. It's wild.
And we don't have that though. So we don't have that. Um,
Exactly.
and our educations don't provide that.
Yeah, by design.
They don't by design. And because, is one of my favorite books. Speaking of favorite books,
That's it. Yeah.
this is for you, Michael.
Let's see what it is.
This happens
Oh
to be
yeah, yeah, yeah. Barry Sanders.
oh no, The
Oh,
Educated
this
Mind.
is.
Kieran
Oh, okay.
Egan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, tell me more.
And he talks about what's it called? I'll give you the title of the chapter.
There's
So
got to be brain hemispheric stuff. Is that why you're saying
no,
it's
no, no, no.
no?
It's about education and about
Okay.
all of our jacked up
I'll have to read it.
educational models that we try to throw together and don't work together. And he
Speaking
calls
of, okay, yeah.
three old ideas and a new one, he calls them. The three old ideas are that education is about socialization,
Mhm.
right? That's what education's job is to socialize people.
Okay, so like say the name again for our listeners. Forgive me. Hold the book
Kieran
up.
Egan, there we
Okay.
go. Kieran Egan,
I'm gonna buy it.
Educated Mind,
Okay.
How Cognitive Tools Shape Our Understanding. And
Ryan
I met
Stansbury, I
him,
hope you're listening. Okay,
great
the
guy.
education.
He
Okay.
was Irish, but he taught in Canada
When did he
uh,
die?
just a couple years ago. And
Okay.
in fact,
Was he going to come to your conference?
he no, not that
Okay.
one, but I
Okay.
when I was a school teacher, I had him come to a conference that I was
Well,
part of putting on
cool.
to give a lecture. He was a super good guy, funny,
Yeah.
very Irish. He actually had also been a monk, or he tried to be a monk for a while.
Well, Trappist or
I think he
Benedictine?
ended up agnostic,
Yeah.
at least about the church. Um, but So his first idea is, this is our educational models is socialization, right?
Mhm.
And why am I out of focus?
Isn't it funny that they call homeschoolers not socialized? It's like me saying the problem with homeschooling is that like you're not hyper contagious with something, you know?
Yeah.
They
Well,
accuse the
socialize
homeschool. Yeah. And there's
socialize
problems with
to
some
what? Right?
homeschooling too. Sure. Yep. Go.
And the thing is, so the socialization model in a Catholic school, at least when I was there, I don't know what they do now. We would start the day with prayers and the
Prayer is good.
allegiance, right? That's
I wouldn't do the
socialization.
pledge.
This is
Yeah.
we're all here. We wear a
We c-
uniform.
we could do prayers and leave out the Pledge of Allegiance. That's my one. But we
Yeah,
could be
but that's
creative
what we
with
did. I
prayer.
mean,
We
that's
could
what
do a
we did. I don't know what they
meditation.
do
Good.
now.
Okay.
Um, and the socialization project of K-12 education right now seems to have a lot to do with uh, teaching children that gender is on a spectrum.
Okay.
Right.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So that's socialization.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Almost
the
all early grade curriculums are by nature socialization. This guy Daniel Quinn was the one who showed me that the like K through third grade is only socialization because you're learning about things that you couldn't possibly not learn if you were locked up in a box. Things like
Mhm.
up and down, in and out, tying shoes. But those things are so obviously going to be taught to everybody. But in those early years, the only real takeaway is education is something that comes across in square rooms under fluorescent lighting in front of people who've been in that strange situation longer than you.
The second old idea he talks about is Rousseau and nature's guidance. So if you just let the child, he's going to figure it out. You know what I mean? Well, and like there was a interesting experiment in education in England, middle maybe into the 70s of the 20th century,
Great.
called the Summerhill School.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have the book on it. I
Yeah,
haven't read it. I just
which
collect
is kind
those
of
things.
interesting. I mean, it was interesting what they were doing, but that's very Rousseauian,
Yeah.
right?
What's
And
the
the
downside? Because we need more Rousseauin, but where are the limits of it? Because we obviously, you heard me, and I'm gonna, even in this episode, I want you to continue to talk. If you were education 3 to 5, you've got 60 parents, 30 parents who are possibly interested. Out of COVID came, and I'm not talking about a reality with this point, but out of COVID came, and I know some other people, they had pods. Some parents just got together. We're not going to put the contagion outside this, but we're going to do things together. And a lot of parents who, when schools opened, are thinking, wow, a lot of pods. That might be one small piece. Start thinking about like where would you, if you knew some parents who are looking for education K through third, or let's say birth through what we now call third grade, maybe infancy to early childhood, how would you define it? You know,
well, that's the challenge, right?
okay, yeah,
Um, but you can tell though if you have with Rousseau and Nature's Guidance, you're just
okay,
trusting the child. This is the weird thing is you have that there's kind of a perverse dance with that with teaching in schools that gender is on a spectrum. So you have
okay.
that the socialization, but you also have
Could
that's
you have
hard.
Rousseau without socialization?
What's
Like
the summer hill?
Stefan, remember our
Well,
guest
you probably
Stefan? Wasn't he
can't, but
essentially? Okay, go. Okay,
but the thing is, if the goal
okay,
of the educational establishment is socialization,
okay, go.
you know. But
I get it. I do get that.
the
I do
third
get
old
that.
idea he talks about is uh, Plato and the nature of reality. So this is like a high content, kind of a classical model, where you want to create independent thinkers, right? Clear, well educated, independent thinkers. Well, guess what? Being an independent thinker does not really jibe well with being socialized, right?
Okay. Yeah, right, right. No, it doesn't.
And it doesn't
That's
and
an
the thing is
intuitive critique of mine.
with the Rousseau thing, that's child-centered, right? What do you want to do today, Bobby?
Which I
And
think has a big portion of truth, but we'll get into that later.
but they all do,
Okay.
but when you try to film them all together, they don't work
Right.
because they kind of compromise each other. They have conflicting goals in mind. Because you cannot, how can you create an independent thinker and a socialized individual at the same time?
We get that. I'm wondering what you would do. It's pretty close to my interests lately.
Well, it's like, It's like that scene
This is
from
cheaper than a consultant's fee, which I'd gladly pay you. Yeah.
it's
What
like
would you
that
do?
scene from The Life of Brian, right? Where you don't
The-
need me, you don't need anybody. You're all individuals. And you hear all the people say, yes, we're all individuals. Then you Michael Palin says, oh, I'm not.
Great movie in so many respects. All their critique of the Roman Empire, then the
It's
love
too
of the
funny.
Roman Empire. Yeah.
But there, I mean, that's what happens. You get a bunch of philosophy majors who went to Cambridge,
Yeah.
starting a comedy troupe, right?
Yeah.
Um, and he proposes something else which we don't need to talk about. But
Okay.
the point he's making is it doesn't work, right?
No, right, right.
And suddenly, at
Very
this point
important.
in history, we're in this weird place where, and I think what you see with the classical education movement that's out there, which was kind of non-existent, wasn't on really
It's,
anybody's radar.
until when Milton, the guy from the University of Chicago, kind of the great books thing, was kind
Milton
of out
Friedman.
there. No, Morton Adler,
I know
Mortimer
who you're talking
Adler,
about.
Mortimer
Yeah, yeah.
Adler, Mortimer
Mortimer
Adler.
Adler.
And that was probably through the 80s. William Bennett, part of the that whole thing. No,
Yeah, but it didn't really seem to get wheels until the
okay,
last 10 years.
understood. The schools, the
Yeah,
parted
and I
hair.
think that reason being is people see the impoverishment of the educational models that are offered to us,
Yeah,
and I think you saw this over COVID. And the interesting thing, so much happened over COVID, and with kids being educated online, and their parents were able to see what was happening in the classroom, and they're like, "What?" And
yeah.
and you've seen all these protests or these school board meetings where parents go there, and why is my kid getting books about how to have oral sex and he's in third grade? Can you tell me why?
That one hits close to home with a friend who I think sometimes has heard about the podcast. It was with a public school. I won't get into the weeds here. Bad scene.
It is. But that's socialization.
Yeah.
That's what they're and it's so surreal because it really, I don't know
The
if
problem with homeschoolers, let me remind you, is because it's your own children, Michael, is they are not socialized. That's
social
actually, yeah, that's actually the biggest
socialized to
critique.
what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
socialized to what? Yeah,
Um yeah, that was yeah, they're not socialized. That was the point. Yeah.
yeah.
Um but what's so weird is
But there
it,
is a socialization of homeschooling, just coda.
yeah.
Jesus said, "You take out one demon, seven more come in." Ivan Illich's critique of a lot of homeschooling, you and I have seen it, and if we could see maybe the temptation, is it takes the mother role, and quite often she has to play the role of a very stringent school marm. It kind of confuses some things, and it creates the same tyranny of grades and outcomes, and brings in most of the pathologies. And this is where Rousseau's important, like a hypertrophy of artificial things, too much artificial in school. We do need structure. It's not totally natural. I think we need
Mhm.
like tomato trellises more than bending a flower to fit your way.
Right.
But that was kind of a coda to say homeschooling socialization is the goal of schools, the institutional schools. They all look the same. We gladly, it's free will marching into things that look like prisons with a gym and a pool. And then, but the homeschool model can interiorize that same thing if you haven't done the work. It's almost like a spiritual discipline. We have to like exercise these demons of the institutional way of thinking of everything, including medicine and certainly the church.
Well, that's why Illich is really into just get it done, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just there are certain things, skills and stuff they need. Go ahead and do that. Just get
Mhm.
it done.
When they're
But
hungry to read, you can teach them in 3 weeks.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think that what it tells us is there can't be a perfect model. And
Good.
Egan offers a model which I like, which I think it seems very rational to me. But nothing's perfect.
No.
No, what's the point of education? To educate people, to give them a certain set of tools to encounter the world, right?
Mhm.
And but going back to where I was when I was talking about this whole idea of socialization, when kids were thrown online and their parents saw what was going on,
Mhm.
they were horrified, and it's And it's I used to teach, it's been a long time since I did it, but Brave New World by Aldous Huxley.
A lot of insights in
And
there.
then it
Yeah.
was written in 1930, published in 32, I think.
Hmm.
And even then, he was predicting that uh that government or the powers would be encouraging sexual play between young children,
Yeah.
you know, and if kids didn't want to engage in their sexual play, they were ostracized. You know, they even had the nursery rhyme, and Huxley is hilarious with these nursery orgy porgy, pudding and pie.
Yeah. I do
Right?
remember that. Yep.
But we're right there. I mean, how could you, I don't know how you can teach Brave New World now and people aren't going, what? So what?
Uh-huh. And
Because
that's where
we're right
Orwell
there.
said
Yep.
they actually
He
go to
saw
that
the
point.
absolute
Yeah.
sexualization of children on the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like Orwell said, they get to a stage where like they know you know they know and they're still going to do it. They're still going to turn
Yeah.
you into a
That's
cipher.
where we're at right now.
Yeah, whether we're seeing from the perspective of like Elon Musk's rockets in outer space as dots, or whether from the nation state as dots, both seemingly huge parts of the left and right conspire towards that Sophia versus Ahrimanic worldview of
Technocratic.
the world, the sacramental world versus the technocratic paradigm.
And I don't know
Techno-feudalism is
where
a
it
fine
goes.
description. Yeah.
And I don't know how you get out of this.
Um, the Marian, because it's local, Michael, that's where a lot of my prayer goes into. Um, I'm teaching this course on Catholic social thought, and I think it's quite self-aware in our time that it hangs at 3,000 feet. It kind of just it comes out. The French Revolution, the Reformation happens, and
Mhm.
that's an identity crisis, right? That there could be another whole kind of faith within, and then and of course there had already been the Eastern Empire, Byzantium, let's call it what it is, and the then you have, of course, the French Revolution, and the church all of a sudden is, down here, and it's looking over. It's first very denunciatory, then it
Mhm.
can see some things, but it's still working itself out. But
Yeah.
so what does the Catholic social thought have at this time? It skewers, and Pope Francis is quite good at this. It skewers the dichotomy of left and right, kind of like Jonathan Haidt does, as being basically temperamental. That Pope Francis sees there's an occupational hazard of being on the left. You tend to treat the wound without looking at the underlying cause at all. And to the right, he goes, you tend to enforce rules and obligations without any understanding at all. And so they're mirror images. I know, having raised four kids, three of my kids, I would say, were born temperamentally conservative. In looking at something that has a distinction but a commonality, like men and women, three of my four kids would probably see what women and men have different first. Then by education, we lead them to see the whole world they have in common. They're two distinct worlds that are two and one at the same time.
Mhm.
And of course, the liberal temperament, my daughter Mary, is prone to see what things have in common. So would see the relationship with our neighbors on the immigration crisis or the animal kingdom or genders is what they have in common first. And then you educate to see, wow, there are important differences. And hopefully you come together. But most of that game has been, again, I can articulate it through history. Both factions were against Socrates, but that self-awareness of where we are now vis-a-vis the state, um, you don't think we can? I lost even the foundational question, but you're saying you don't think we can come up with a model of schooling, and that makes me feel comfortable. Actually, that makes me feel happy.
Well, I don't, not really a model of schooling. I think in a
Yeah,
way, I mean, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, right? So
yeah,
you have,
right, right.
and you're not, since you can't have a perfect model, there is, but the thing is, who's in control of the model?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Do you think there can be a bottom up? Let's start there. Can,
Yes.
like, these pods were kind of bottom up. The families got together and worked it
Yeah,
out.
that's
And
bottom up.
pods can only work at a scale. What would be your
Local
guess as to
control.
scale? Yep. 12
Right.
families probably about, in
Yeah,
pods, and
but
they could come together in other associations, 12 families in small pods, other associations.
yeah, because what you have right now, I mean, the And it's, I mean, it's just, it's weird. I mean, academic culture is so poisonous. And all of these bad ideas, that was one of the things they used to say is the English department is where discredited theories from other disciplines go to die.
Right, right. Mhm.
But we see that it's in education programs. I think, yeah, these bullshit ideas that really they're fads. Like uh, 20 years ago it was multiculturalism. We're doing
Mhm.
multiculturalism, and now they're doing genders on a spectrum. You know,
Mhm.
then they get these fads that they throw into education that just bullshit. Well, when I was a kid, right,
Yeah.
and this was when they were doing the new math,
Mhm.
which is and the new math. I don't know what the hell that was, but it ruined a
Yeah.
whole generation of kids as far as love for math goes.
I heard we're just coming out of it in reading in New York. They got totally rid of phonics, and the governor was on TV saying it was an abject failure. It's like nobody learned
Yes.
anything for 6 years, and nobody's really held accountable.
Well, in Michigan, I mean, you're seeing, I think I saw some statistics not too long ago. I wrote about it in my Substack that, and I know this from teaching, that the ability for people to read competently is, you know, has
Okay.
plummeted. Um, so it's like we're functional illiterates,
Yeah.
and people don't know anything. And I think this is, part of the attraction people have for Jordan Peterson in particular, who is about as, I mean, there's a lot of things I don't like about him, but he knows a lot of stuff. He's a high content guy
Yeah.
and a
He's
really
closer to a
competent
Carl Jung.
psychologist,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. To give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And and so he's a high content, really smart guy, old-fashioned professor, if you ask me.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the attraction, especially young men have for him, is because he sounds like he knows what he's talking about and often does.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I
People
always say
like
he's
that.
he's always the brightest person in the room.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
and young men like that. One of the keys for teaching, teaching boys versus girls.
Hmm.
And this is absolutely true in my experience as a teacher
Hmm.
and as a father, is
Hmm.
that to be a successful teacher of boys or a parent, the boys have to know you're the authority and that you know what you're talking about and that you have kind of a moral uprightness or whatever, right? That you have strength
Yeah.
and they trust that, right? Girls don't need that. Girls need to know they're safe
Mhm.
and then they can flourish.
Okay.
If boys think you're an idiot, they won't flourish and they'll give you all kinds of trouble. And I know this from teaching experience. Um, and that goes back to our discussion of gender and feminism, which would tell you that that's not true. And they'd point to some exception to the rule
Mhm.
as
Right.
as if it proves a new rule, and it
Hmm.
doesn't,
Hmm.
right? Everybody, we all, thank you, Carl Jung. We all have, all of us men have an anima. I have a feminine in soul, you know.
Very, fewer and fewer are finding it. That
Well,
it
the
goes
thing
back to
is,
recursively
it,
back to one of our
and women have
earlier
the
feeder
animus, right? The,
conversations.
the, the masculine side of women. You're trying to find some kind of integration. Well, the thing is, and I will die on this hill, with the whole trans phenomenon. That has always seemed to me uh, an attempt to solve a psychological challenge through mechanical means.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're really trying to integrate the anima or the animus. They really are.
Yeah.
But they think that means getting surgery and getting on a lifetime prescription of hormone drugs, which is nuts, right? And
Mhm.
that's about as scientific materialist as you can get. And the weird thing about it is people say, well, I was born in the wrong body. What? So
We
you
just don't know
have,
what that means.
I
We just
don't
have
even know
no
what
idea.
that means.
It
So who's
can't.
I?
What gave somebody privileged access to go down through a male body that has, and again, notwithstanding the very, very gray area, of good fences make good neighbors. I mean, and there's compassion all
Right.
around. And there is gender dysmorphia, but it really, I've always said that it hurts the ability to think. Gay marriage doesn't totally hurt my ability to think. a man falls in love with another man. But the idea that all of a sudden you could say, you know, you're a woman, how did you get outside and into other women's heads to know you are? Or how did you know?
Oh,
You
they're
know,
not like us. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, and here's the thing. Now, I've heard this explanation before, and I'm going to drop. I'm going to be harsh with y'all.
Mhm.
So, a lot of anthroposophists have told me over the years that they really think it's because of either of abortion that people were supposed to be born into a female body and they didn't have any one available to them, so they had to settle for a male body, which I don't buy that at all
Yeah,
because it's bullshit. And
because it's bullshit.
it is
Yeah, yeah,
bullshit.
yeah, yeah.
It's explaining away something, people, anthropops tend to, I'll find a spiritual answer. But the thing is, they are thinking in binaries that the
Mhm.
spirit and the body are different things.
Yeah,
And
right.
so are the trans people. And it's not true.
Hmm.
I'm a monist,
Yeah.
right? The spirit and the body I'm a Rosicrucian in that way, that they're
Hmm.
opposite poles, or they're the extent the poles of one thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
At one pole you have almost all spirit and a little tiny bit of body, and on the
Yeah,
other pole you have almost all body but a little tiny bit of spirit.
yeah.
That's how we're constituted.
Didn't Leibniz call matter like a spiritus coagulus, right? Does that play into the Waldorf worldview? Like in the Eastern world, they wouldn't even see anything like a Big Bang. This is Owen Barfield. Forgive me, fans, if I'm wrong on it. But that they would see matter congealed out of spirit. Where in the Western world, all left brain, we always just have to blow things up. It has to blow up. Uh, and
What's
but do
like
you, the spirit and body, how do you envision that interpenetrating relationship? Almost like coagulated, the body, like if people say, I hate sounding like a pop physicist or something, you
Mhm.
know, uh, but the notion that to overgeneralize, Heisenberg called the matter in front of me, the desk I'm sitting at, you know, um, spinning electrons, right? It's congealed. And that, the Eastern worldview, which might need to be part of the Catholic worldview, kind of a polarity, is that again, matter congealed out of spirit. Um, how do you envision the relationship between spirit and matter? And I know
um
this is something of a diversion, and stay on your story, but I think it's an important one because if we're going to educate that way, it's the foundational question, I think.
well, I think I don't want to make an absolute principle of it because I think it's much more plastic than that. It's much
Mhm.
more
Yeah,
I like
it
my
doesn't
deep
hover
my
around.
deep fear of giving definitions because people will think it's the definition.
Agreed.
But I think for practical purposes, in teaching, I don't think you have to, or with dealing with people, people have kind of like with the animus and the anima.
Hmm.
It's two things that exist as one thing, or in one thing.
Right.
But spirit and matter are two polarities. We have a spiritual nature and a physical nature, a material
Hmm.
nature. But uh, but if we think about them in a Cartesian way as two different things,
Yeah.
then that's wrong, right?
Agreed. Yep.
And that's what I think part of the
That's
problem.
what coagulation is kind of fun. Coagulation. It gives a
And all these
spectrum.
things are approximations, they're metaphors. I don't think they can capture
100%.
reality.
Yeah. Yep.
So I like that way better. And I think what happened with anthroposophy is I think Steiner really trained in German idealism and kind of this Rosicrucian underground that was going on in Germany at the time. His ideas, he found vocabulary for his ideas, for his intuitions when he was hanging around with the Theosophists, who the Theosophists were very Buddhist or Hindu and very spirit
Blavatsky and
body
all the
dualist,
others.
right?
Right, right, right. Yep.
Yeah. And that gave him a vocabulary, but it was an inexact vocabulary, I think. And I think it in a way, and I'm not saying he's wrong, but necessarily, but I am saying part of the problem there is it does reify this idea this Cartesian idea that the spirit and the body are two different things.
Hmm. Very
And I
helpful.
don't think that's how it works. I don't now, do I know how it works? No.
Hmm.
But I think for practical purposes, you can't pretend those. And I think you see the cultural repercussions of what happens when you tell people that they have a spirit and a body.
That's the right. Right. And that's a problem of in the Catholic Church of the Neo-Thomism, right? You
Hmm.
know, the confusion of something like spirit and body, that question, thinking you can get at it with that Thomistic understanding of, what does the Greek word aletheia mean? Unveiling, right? That's such a healthier notion. That when we're trying to get at this thing, there can be it's a mystery. You enter into an unveiling of that truth
Hmm.
about spirit and body. But we in the West, again, left brain, the a certain form of Aristotelianism, a certain form of Thomism, but we kind of equate the signified with the signifier.
Hmm.
And thinking that truth is not an unveiling, but a correct correspondence,
Yeah.
between our idea of a thing and the thing itself, right?
Yeah.
That's
And
really
I think,
dangerous. Yeah.
and I think, human beings have this tendency to want to have a concept they can just hold on to, right?
Yeah.
And what I think is more helpful is, and that's why I don't like giving definitions necessarily, if I can help it, because even Steiner didn't like it.
Hmm.
That if you do that, you harden things, and people just have a ready-made concept they can carry along. Like,
Yeah.
well, like when you say the term the church, one of my favorite terms, because that means different things to different people,
That's
and
my
they
whole
never
thing. Yeah.
think about what it really means.
Hmm.
So it becomes a glittering generality, right? I know. Well, we who are part of the church. What do you mean by the church?
Hmm.
And if you ask an evangelical Christian, he's going to tell you one thing. A Catholic will tell you one thing, and an Ortho bro will tell you another thing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And why don't they that? They can't even come to terms about what that means, which means, and that's why I don't like to define it, because I think it's probably, well, put it this way, whatever it is, it's not what you three guys are telling me,
Right. Right. Right.
right? And but
I
what I
like to
think,
play with
but I
poetic
think people get
metaphors of
get
like
an
she. Yeah.
intuition
Yeah.
of the church,
Sure. Sure. Sure.
but to try to describe it kills it.
Uh-huh.
We murder to dissect. Thank you, Wordsworth, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's what happens. And I think what's really helpful, and this is one of the lessons I learned from Steiner, is to not come to definition, because that way you let the imagination work on it. And this is, we talked about Steiner with dolls before, right? Where
Hmm.
he
Hmm.
said, don't give a kid a doll that pees and cries and opens its eyes. Just give a kid a rag doll with a couple dots for eyes and a little thread for a smile, because that way you let the child's imagination do the rest of the work.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And I think the same thing when we talk about the church or spirit, soul, and body, or whatever we talk about. If you get too much into taking an inventory, here's the spirit, right? Right?
Right.
You get too Aristotelian and categorize everything.
Hmm.
That's it.
And we're kind
That's
of having an iteration of the Rousseauian piece again, but we wouldn't want to leave it too not. Yes, we can leave it undefined, but right now I think people are ecclesiology has again horrible strands like all of them. But a lot of ecclesiology, when I read de Lubac, I'm reading his Splendor of the Church now. It's capturing the best of that. There's a feminine thing. There's this. Illich has, it's that thing that takes its nourishment from the Eucharist. I like that because it's kind
right.
of a verb, a verb. Um, but yeah, so some of
And
these poetic images floating around have been a great thing.
and, and Rosemary Houghton does the same thing,
Yeah,
Catholic thing, right?
she's more of a here comes everybody, right? In a
No, but
beautiful
she
way.
talks
No,
about the church. She says there's the church,
uh-huh.
which is this body link, very
Yeah, yeah.
paternalistic, but there's also Sophia, which is also part of the church.
Right. And it's like Illich's church as it and church as she. Skeletal structure acts very much like one, kind of limited in its movement, but it's to be revered. It's matter itself,
Yeah,
and it's carried the time bomb of the gospels down through history. It's like,
right,
thank you, old guy. But it's not going to be the most flexible. It's inherently conservative. It needs prophets for it to work
right.
accurately, and it needs
So
to make room for them. Yep.
yeah, so I think that's an important thing, Mike,
Yep.
because with the structure, you got to have something to push against.
Absolutely.
You have to have a reference point, right? So it
Yeah.
helps to have a reference point and I've been writing about this. I just finished an essay on Dylan Thomas yesterday, a long one, which I'm hoping to put in a new book. And
Help people with our books. This is what the a trusted monk friend of mine, somebody I very much admire on the whole spiritual thing, would say, like the whole thing is here, the mystery, Paschal mystery, the thing, the thing. So for our listeners, the everyman, not trying to promote money, but the this is enough. Start here. It's pretty cheap, and you can get like the whole thing, according to somebody I highly value. That was a little commercial for our readers who like to have books shown. Yep.
Well, the thing is with Dylan Thomas, this is what I was uh because I've read Dylan Thomas a lot back in my 20s and 30s, and I always come back to him. But I decided, I've never written about Dylan Thomas. I should write an extended thing about him. So I read all of his poetry again a couple weeks ago, made some notes, and I what I came to, and there's a lot of Christianity, a lot of Bible in his
Oh,
poetry,
for
but in
sure.
such a wild way, though,
Hmm.
in such an organic, I called him a reincarnated druid
Hmm.
because there's such
A
um,
play, a play. I think.
well, he's discovering the wild of God is what he's
Yeah.
doing,
Okay.
I think. And it's kind of an organic Christianity kind of rising up from the imagination and from the
Mm.
landscape,
Hmm. Hmm.
which I can relate to, which is what I did in my last book. Um, and but he discovers something new in Christianity, I think,
Say
in his
more.
poetry. As tragic as a figure he was in real life. Um, but he couldn't have done that if he didn't have the structure of the church. And not like he was a big churchy guy either, but if he
Hmm.
didn't have the background of church history in Wales or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But he's not writing theology, right?
Hmm.
He's discovering something,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Discovering a kind of organic atavistic church. That's all that that's just the cosmic church, you could say,
Right.
that is involved in the life and death and eros of the world, of the cosmos. And
This
what
is
I
very interesting coming from you in a neat way, but like because I agree with everything you're saying, like, down to the jot and tittle. Um, this is the metaphor I play with, and I work in one sense in the belly of the beast, the very belly of the beast. You feel like you're part of something that's gone back. You do. I don't know if it's good or bad. It seems mostly it's heavy, like 2,000 years, and if it's trying to slough that off, boy, there's so many things working against it doing so. And right now the bankruptcy and everything. What's your latest thinking on this institutional relationship with this other? Because you're
I don't
taking a
know.
journey. You've been taking a journey since COVID. How do you give
I
a
think
status update of like, are you, what do you see? What have you seen on your journey?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair answer. That's a very fair answer.
I
I'd
don't
rather
know.
have you say I don't know until it ripens for you, because
Well, I
you're
don't know.
you're a very thoughtful person.
I think everything's in flux right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Every institution
Hmm.
across the West
Yeah.
is in heavy flux, if not. And I think, King's North's recent thing, he says the West is dying. It might even already be dead. And he's got a point,
Uh-huh.
right? I don't think his solution helps at all, but he's got a
What
nice
what is
diagnosis.
he saying? I still kind of like John Michael Greer more than Paul on this stuff.
Yeah, well, he says basically, why don't we just be monks, or
Yeah.
just go to the Orthodox liturgy and do
That's
stuff. Um,
a hard one for me to take. I don't know
Me too. Um,
why.
it's very pessimistic.
Yeah, like mother issues or something.
Yeah,
No,
well,
that's not fair. That's
other
not
issues,
fair at
other
all.
issues, I don't know what it is, but it's very
That I
pessimistic.
attacked him for that on when we had him on.
And I'm
Not
not into.
attack. I mean, again, gosh, brighter than me, smarter than me, has done more for more people. But on that issue, like he was so fierce when his work for Greenpeace, and he was talking about his like Romanian spiritual father. And I think I know these guys. I know.
Yeah.
Say no more.
And it's that is a normal response.
Yeah.
It's a normal psychological response, but I don't think it's a mature one.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
Nor do I.
I mean, I kind of hope everything falls apart so we can build something new, but
Yeah.
that doesn't that doesn't mean the West is dead or anything. It just means, these horrible technocratic institutions in at least a good chunk of the Catholic hierarchy is doing is that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
the Synod in academia is that.
Yeah.
Government is that.
Hmm.
And not
The
just
idea that
our
it's like
government
nestled,
across the
St. Paul
West.
says, nestles right in the center of the church. I read a lot of reviews of Agamben's book on evil that seems, very Illich influenced. Um, Interesting book. I think I want to read it. But
Hmm.
I can even say, I say for our listeners here and for anybody listening, the Malachi prophecies is one of the great poetic accompaniments to this journey, because it would have Pope Francis being a last, I'm going to say, in that way of doing papacy. So
Hmm.
even like friends of mine, like, in one sense, insiders, or just like people who really have studied the Catholic thing in a different way than Rosemary Houghton, but are with you. That's what I'm saying. I'm with you on everything you're saying. So it's all ending. And again, Chesterton said it dies and resurrects, but that even Francis himself in the institutional ways, I see the guy's kind of Janus figured. Like he wrote this encyclical on the Sacred Heart, which is something of a time bomb. He just gave it to us, some weeks ago. Delixit notes. It's Michael. It's amazing. But then when you read Pope Benedict, even on Caritas et Duas, I'll have to teach that in class. To me, that one is funny. It's like Illichian on love. Then it sells the farm and just talks about Catholic charities, love from a distance, drone bombing, Ebola crisis, just going around the world. And it seems Janus faced. And then Pope Francis, even in Laudate Si, he seems, or Pope Francis and Benedict, it's what they have in common that probably separates me more than anything else from them, and they're still my holy fathers, is they trust these intergovernmental organizations much more than
I
I do.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Pope Francis then, in addition to that kind of complexity, is kind of Jada-faced himself. It's like he pleases the New World Order on all the crazy stuff he did for COVID, and then throws a bomb over here that is actually quite incendiary, and that's my way of kind of looking at him. Uh,
Yeah,
but it's
and I
getting the nestling of the two is right in the heart of like, your left hand now doesn't know what your right hand is doing, I
right.
guess.
And that's the thing with me and Pope Francis in particular. But
Yeah.
once they invoke the World Economic Forum or one of those NGOs, I tune out right there.
Yeah.
I'm changing the channel, right?
But then the next minute you're getting some time bomb that's laid to undermine. And I'm not saying it will ever undermine. And those things drive me as crazy as they do. But he's nothing if not a kind of pugnacious individual who likes to piss off people who try to box him in.
But
And so that's what he does. Yep.
yeah, I mean, there's this kind of lazy thinking, and I'm reading a pretty okay book, pretty informative book.
Show
It's
it or tell us about it.
it is called. I can't remember the name of it.
You have good nasal health, I see.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, can't remember the name of this book. What's it called?
What's it about? Author?
It's The Green Ages, I think it's called,
Okay.
which is about the Middle Ages. Um, there.
You've recommended this book, Michael, as you're looking for it, Winters of the World. A
That is
dear friend
good.
of mine, Stephen Sprecher. This is by, she's still alive, Eleanor Parker,
Oh
and
yeah, I
just has this
follow her on. Yeah,
delightful romp through history. Get this book, Winters of the
was
World,
very good.
listeners. Yep.
Yeah, and it's similar to that, but it's
Yeah.
about in the Middle Ages how um what they did, how they operated, how monasteries, for instance, were communal, yet they were super successful financially, economically.
Yeah.
So it's looking at what we could learn from the Middle Ages, basically, to in the next now. And I love the
Mhm.
book in a lot of ways, but I also hate the book because she talks about, it starts off, which I think not, I don't think she mentioned the World Economic Forum, but she used economic buzz terms like global
Okay.
warming or climate change
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
sustainability. I'm like, oh man, find new
Yeah.
language because you're turning me off.
Yeah, in
Um,
California, they're like promising to cut the red tape at the same time as it's irrefutable proof that it's, man-made global warming. If the climate's changing, you've still got me in dialogue. If it's man-made global warming, or if you say we treat the earth like crap, you've still got me in dialogue. If you say it's a sin screaming to high heavens that we have islands the size of Hawaii of plastic floating around the Arctic Ocean. You've got me in the same dialogue. When you convince me that fluctuating temperatures right now are due to man-made global climate change that's specifically dependent on like the problems of the working class, we've started to break our ability to talk about it.
Hmm.
But I do get you. So she starts off in that
Yeah.
way.
When you tell me the way to solve that problem is to
More
raise
power to,
taxes,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
is to take more of my money.
But
Yeah,
the
really?
only answer is a federation of free cities, as Preparata says. We
I
can do it again. Yep.
and that's who knows what's going to happen.
Okay.
No. Um, but we'll see. I mean, I'm cautiously hopeful that under the Trump administration, not that it'll solve all the problems, but that at least they'll cut enough of the red tape and cut the connections to corporations and big pharma and stuff
Has Greer
that will
talked about that
allow
at all?
people, pardon me?
Has Greer talked about that at all?
Yes.
What is he saying at this point? Thank you. Because again, I I'm probably less sanguine than you, because when they cut the red tape, I would think because Greer, he's always clued into the carbon aspect, that they cut the red tape and it's our addictions to like free energy, or how do we nuance that whole
Well,
issue?
no, I mean, part of the red tape is that, for instance, and I think you've probably heard this, that there are a lot of free energy experiments that have taken place over time that have been squelched by the government.
That's
And
Guido. Sure, sure, sure. Are they talking
yeah,
about those forms of energy and getting them up and running? Or are they just talking about drill, baby,
I
drill?
haven't seen that,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
but the thing is, I hope that that the Trump administration creates an environment
Let's hope.
that will leave people alone so they can do that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm,
You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Or and not just leave inventors and stuff alone, but to leave just, farmers, organic farmers, for instance,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
small
yeah. We
10,
both hope.
10-acre farms. Leave them alone
Mm-hmm.
to figure it out, because then you could the thing is the way that things structured out, you can't do small is beautiful.
Right.
I mean, you can call yourself a Christian anarchist or whatever, but guess what? You can't be one.
The main one, just to give our friend Guido like his vantage point, would be the main aspect of being able to do our own that can supplant it is in the realm of means of exchange, and
Hmm.
perishable currency. And that we have the technology now, which is poignant, right? Because we're not saying don't use modern technology or that AI is intrinsically evil from the get-go. There's scale issues, or at least that's where I am. But I don't think, so we wait. And again, maybe it's the same thing probably you're edging towards, is although we can kind of set up some of the infrastructure moving towards a perishable currency in these small kind of local routes. And it's in there in Guido's book, New Directions in the Catholic Social and Political Research, these small kind of things, they would link up. Um, you know, there's some people who'd say we can kind of protect these things, other ones, but do you just think it's an issue of timing that more has to kind of collapse? Or because I would say I'm kind of
I
in
don't
this
think
one,
more
just
has
start
to. Well,
building the other now, and hoping for the best from what you're saying. Less optimistic about it, or hopeful, I should say.
um, collapse. Well, I don't know if it's collapse is the right word. You know, well, collapse the hegemony of big pharma in cahoots with the CDC and those kinds of bodies,
Oh,
which is,
those would be unambiguously to me good things. Yeah,
yeah. So, but that's what I mean by, get those bad actors out of our hair, that to allow people to flourish.
yeah,
To, you know, like in Canada, I think it's Canada, and I know it's in England, where they have outlawed or greatly reduced people's availability to homeopathy,
yeah.
because that's totally,
Those are
big
areas where
pharma driven. That's big
be,
pharma driven.
because they're organic and things like that. That's a cause for me that my understanding of the spiritual life is we can pray into those and they will have success. Like in the name of herbs, under like Saint Hildegard of Bingen.
Yeah.
Um, you pray for these issues. These are the hedge issues, like the ability to educate our own children, the ability to and to just have them opt out of schooling. Defending those. Um, encroachments of the medical industry on people's rights to just kind of look after themselves.
Hmm.
These are the areas where I think we'd have success, even legislatively, if everybody agreed on them. But they're so good at getting us, divided politically. But conservative and liberals of the best stripe of both, this new political alignment you and I talk about, which is hopefully represented here. But people from all over the spectrum want those things, and Joe Rogan's talking about them, and they're talked about on hippie podcasts. Your friend Marie, I think, or Sherry, was the herbalist who was on.
Scary.
Yeah, just
No,
wonderful.
no, no. That was Mary.
Yeah,
Mary
Mary,
Walton. Yeah.
Merry, Mary. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, yeah, I mean, if you can get the government out of people's hair and just let them do what they got to do,
Hmm.
and let it work,
Hopefully,
let people
hopefully.
in small communities work it out.
Yeah.
Like I told you, the state of Michigan has been really shitty to the Amish
Yeah.
for a while here. In fact, I had some lambs butchered a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to the butcher because about a year and a half ago, the state of Michigan was really coming down hard on them. He said they
Hmm.
finally stopped picking on them.
Yeah.
But they do that, right? They want to
Yeah.
let you know who's in charge.
Yeah. They just hassle you and hassle you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was also something about the state of Michigan, this another thing they raise about fear with bird flu. And now they're gonna make people kill all their chickens, right? There was a threat.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
haven't heard they've backed off of that.
Yeah. I have a feeling about this is that administration is just a poetic metaphor, an image, is that the incoming administration, this is only for me, because of they'll release some of those restrictions. And I don't think they're going to do anything good from the top down, but by releasing those which are unambiguously good, it will create maybe more chance for new things, but that's going to be on us. And you're not somebody I would ever beat up. You're a doer. You're a doer. But nothing's going to come to us. But we're going to
Yeah,
see more tumble, but it's going to be clearer and more honest about tumbling, I think, in some
yeah.
sense.
Just if they get half the gangsters out of there,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
would be a great start.
yeah, 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 yeah. Who knows? Yeah. What are you doing this weekend?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have any big plans.
Hmm.
It's
What
supposed to
else?
get really cold in a couple days.
Yeah. I just brought in a wood pellets. We had one of those kind of nifty things. They're kind of somewhere between tech and not tech, but they run on a little electricity. Brought in a lot of pellets because we can't. Our barn doors are just yeah. It's got barn doors. Car can't go in there, but it's big. Is when the ground swells, it's hard to get
Oh, you get
those
one of
open
those?
those.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it stinks. How about you?
Nothing. I got
Yeah,
I got nothing. What am I doing?
good.
Don't have any plans.
You're writing and reading and everything.
Yeah, actually I finished that Dylan Thomas thing. I'm thinking next I'm going. I
Where are
think
you publishing the Dylan Thomas thing?
I'm publishing installments on Substack right now
Okay,
because
yeah,
it's
right, right. I'll link to it. Yeah.
and I'm trying to get. I have with that one I'll have maybe 150 pages for a book.
Okay, good.
So going to get it. Maybe I think I'm going to write one. I think next on kind of what a topic that would fit in with us. This idea that arose with Berdyaev and Florensky of the New Middle Ages,
Mhm,
which
mhm.
they talked about in a good way,
Yeah,
versus what I think we're in the new Dark Ages right now, but they were talking about the New Middle Ages. So I'm kind of reading about that and thinking about that and also that's why I bought that book I mentioned, The Green Ages.
yeah. But I'd
It's
like to see you treat for the New Middle Ages because for me, it's evocative, is something our listeners have heard before. I think we need to sell people that the theme would be liberty. And I'll go back again to Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. But in a nutshell, he just showed that we could see, and I'm going to use a caricature of the rad trads. They want color in the society where everybody's just made to be a digit, like a census or a piece of data. This hunger for color, we've trained, and I don't think Jordan Peterson helps us here. And I think I mentioned it the last time. People are doubling down on aspects of the right that we can only see color with hierarchy. The best I've ever seen is an essay from Owen Barfield but it's called Society and Art and Culture. But the artistic principle, which you would get from David Bohm, Michael, is like holography, where the
hmm
the the little places share the grand design.
yeah.
And this is really where the beauty is, that if you look at a masterpiece like the Sistine Chapel, the little place shares the whole picture and adds to it, and it's irreplaceable. But for that thing you're working on, the new Middle Ages, I think seminal because we have nostalgia, which is the opposite, for Christopher Lash and for Wordsworth and Coleridge, as the fructifying force of memory, the disciplined use of memories of that first Middle Ages. But we have to push forward and not go back.
Hmm.
And because the
Yeah.
worst is the corruption of the best, sure, that's a pretty big sin just to wax in nostalgia. But I think we need to create, and you're a poet, an image, and I think at their best, Whitman was working on this, Twain was working on this. How can we entice people with a colorful image that brings together almost a web version of hierarchy that's less, because people will come back to you, no,
Hmm.
it's still the hierarchy where the top serves the lowest.
Right.
I actually think we're breaking out of that a little bit. What do you think?
Um,
There was a slave class, what Twain saw. It
well,
all
I
this
think
stuff rests
one
on
of
a
the
slave class.
well, actually one of the things Berdyaev talks about in what book is it? I can't remember which book. Um, and he talks, and this is what really struck me when I was reading last night, is that he talks about the Middle Ages, the kind of two models, and for
Okay.
men, he says,
Organic,
were the monk
hmm
and the knight. And I think when I was reading it, it kind of struck me that really the Ortho Bros are really in Kingsnorth. They basically want to turn the world into a monastery.
Okay, yeah.
They want to retreat from the world.
Yeah.
Where the knight, at least in the archetypal sense, um, was not one who retreats from the world, but who engages the world. And what's the
So it's a new knighthood of the Sophia, type
well,
of
yeah,
thing.
I think so because when they would dub a knight in the Middle Ages, they gave him, they dubbed him in the name of God, Saint Michael, and Saint George, and gave him the right to bear arms and to meet justice,
hmm
right? And and I think this is we were talking earlier today about these guys who are attracted to all these OnlyFans girls who are making them millionaires. They're kind of perverse monks.
Yeah, right. Or
They're not
hikikomori.
knights.
Hikikomori, they call them in Japan, like these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who renounce everything and they just go into an apartment, order from like Grubhub and have plastic dolls and play video
Yeah,
games all day. They never leave their apartment. It's so
they're
sad.
they're
It's so
yeah, they're
sad.
perverted monks.
Yeah.
They're It's a weird kind of incel thing, right?
Yeah.
Whereas and I was asking myself and I said, well, where's the knighthood in our culture now? It doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
No, it's there's problems in both levels. One is it's embedded in I think, a bad hierarchical way from the Middle Ages of thinking about it. There can be another one, and the other one it suffers from when we look at like Soloviev, is it suffers from this kind of counteraction to the transgender phenomenon of this hyper distinction between male and feminine. So one would be knight, like these kind of and I think we capture the distinction best. And Steiner left us this inestimable treasure in these two gestures of St. Michael, from the swashbuckler to the gesture just making eye contact with you and saying, move forward, step into your own royal clothes. But when you picture royal, picture a tunic more than mink ermine. you know, we need
Right.
we need we need to put everything down into the real. You have to learn the knight is for sacrifice, not for combat. The knighthood is for sacrifice. The clothing is quite different. You know, the war is within ourselves. Let's use the word sin and reform ourselves so that we can reform the world. Let's not avoid the new knighthood. Will not avoid, which piety, excessive piety, can do, the inner journey that gets you to the inner darkness and leaves it there.
Hmm.
Certainly not for the old knighthood. The only way out was not through. The new knighthood has to meet
Well,
itself first. Yeah,
and it's an archetype. It's
it
not.
is. It is.
I mean, and it's an ideal, and part of that ideal in the late Middle Ages also touched on the movement of the troubadours, right? And the
Right.
exaltation of the feminine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like one of the appearances of the Sophianic in Western culture,
hmm hmm
right? And that's part of it because if you don't have um if you don't have a strong male presence, you have a perverted one, and then the answer to that is a perverted female presence,
Right. Right. Right.
right? Or is a caricature,
hmm
right? And so we have kind of the caricature of the whore of Babylon right now.
Yeah.
And it's disturbing.
It's disturbing. Yeah, that's well said. The Horror of Babylon. We also have a Tower of Babel. You know. Excellent conversation.
It's a happy end.
The whore of Antichrist with the whore of Babylon. I'm gonna thank everybody for listening to the Regeneration podcast. Uh, I consider, maybe we'll institutionalize it next year and just be more open. But between the solstice and maybe Groundhog's Day, for me, it's kind of catch as catch can. We haven't talked in weeks. We did what we do is we saw each other's face and started hitting record. It was great talking to you again, Michael.
Good to see you.
Yep. Thanks for listening to the Regeneration Podcast, friends. We'll talk to you
Thank
next
you.
week. Yep.